Dr. Dušek, you have the floor. We're glad to see you again. Thank you, dear friends. I will not introduce myself. I would like to tell you that it was my wife and I who worked on the products that I will talk about today. One can say that we have been studying the properties of plants for more than 30 years. For more than 30 years, we have been accumulating information about the healing properties of plants that we add to our database of medicinal herbs. When we talked earlier, you said that it had taken 15 years to create this formula. Did I get this right? Yes, you did. How did it all begin, Dr. Dušek? These developments began with the study of publications in scientific magazines of different countries. From the old books of the 18th century, we learned how these medicinal herbs were used then, how they were processed, how extracts were made of them, and what parts of the plants were used. It was important for us to find out the proportions of the extracts in the compositions, as well as to find out which herbs can or cannot be combined. After we added all the accumulated information to our database, we agreed that it was time to create an effective botanical medicine that could be used to enter the market. The history of creating a product to reinforce the immune system began with the fact that we selected 120 medicinal plants from our database, each of which had something to do with the immune system. Then, based on the data from the scientific literature and our own application practice, we chose 57 herbs out of 120. However, these remaining 57 herbs needed to be checked so that we could make sure that synergy only would arise between them, and there would be no antagonism. I'm going to tell you more about this later. Then, we began a detailed study of the compatibility of these herbs with one another. We made 57 extracts and started a step-by-step study on how these extracts affect one another. Dr. Dušek, can I ask you a question? Did you use a set of these herbs to create a product that fights viruses? No, it's not quite so. The main purpose of this product was to reinforce and activate the immune system. General stimulation of the immune system. Yes. And then based on these preliminary studies, did you come up with the product that you had already worked on at the state level? It was a product that on those days was not tested out by us. I will give you the background. For more than 15 years, we have been supplying Vietnam with the well-known Fetoviron product. We proved ourselves to be very good there. Well, when I met the Minister of Health, I was asked if we had a drug to fight tuberculosis. My answer was that there was a drug to enhance the immune system, but no one knew how it worked with tuberculosis, since there was no tuberculosis in Germany, and accordingly, we had no opportunity to test the product in the clinic. And then the government of Vietnam opened all the doors for me, provided all the opportunities for me to bring this medication so that we could test its effectiveness on humans. So we tested it on a fairly large number of people. The head of a large hospital in Hanoi helped me. This was a specialized hospital for tuberculosis patients. Together with our Vietnamese colleagues, we conducted research on 450 patients. I have just opened a diagram showing the effectiveness of this product. So, you can see this diagram. To make a gist of the study clear for you, I must explain that there are certain standards for the treatment of tuberculosis all over the world. including antibiotics, which are intended to treat tuberculosis. All the patients with tuberculosis must take a course of these antibiotics. It is established by the World Health Organization. To check on how our product affects the condition of patients with tuberculosis, we supplemented the required course of antibiotics with our product use. This was the only way to test its effect. The first results of the research appeared quite quickly. If you look at the diagram, you can see the figure 100% next to the left columns. It means that according to the analyses, Koch's bacillus was detected in all patients. This is a special analysis, the culture for which is taken from the throat. In all patients, this analysis was positive. The study involved two groups. One received an antibiotic and our medication, the other only an antibiotic. In the diagram, you can see T2. These are the results in 2 weeks. At the end of 14 days, a huge difference can be seen between those patients who received our medication and those who did not receive it. You can see that in 86% of those who, in addition to antibiotics, took our medication, the analysis for Koch's bacillus became negative. This happened due to the fact that the body's immune system was maintained and reinforced, which helped to cope with tuberculosis faster. Well, this tendency continued. Look at the diagram. After 4 weeks of research, only 10% of tuberculosis patients remained in the first group. By the end of the 8th week, that is 2 months after the research started, only 6% remained. If we compare these results with the control group, in which patients received only antibiotic therapy, a significant difference is obvious. The results of the first 2 weeks made such an impression on the Ministry of Health of Vietnam that they decided to include our product in the list of medications necessary to fight tuberculosis in the country. Dr. Dusek, now it probably makes sense to clarify that this is precisely about supporting the immune system, about a product that positively influences the patient outcomes. Apparently, the effect that they saw was non-standard for herbal products. It means that the product was far too effective. The fact is that a person with Koch's bacilli spreads them around and poses a danger to everyone around him or her. The fact that after only 2 weeks of co-administration with antibiotics, only 14% of participants remained positive for tuberculosis influenced the inclusion of our product in the list. A separate point must be made about a thing that pleased me, although I learned about this later. They probably didn't want to tell me. It turned out that the professor who was involved in this research in Vietnam was a member of the World Health Organization board. So, when he saw these results, he presented our medication to the World Health Organization, and many countries of Africa immediately became interested in it, and they still purchase the product from us at the country level until today. As for the results of this research, the effect on Koch's bacillus is one of the positive effects. There were other effects that you may be interested in, since they are directly related to the product in question. Today, we will be talking about Fetoviron product. Fetoviron also works effectively against viral infections. If we want to win the fight against viruses, we must clearly understand and have a justification for how the product works in the body. Yes, and we will certainly talk about this. Just be patient. Our participants, who are already 1,000 and even more, as a rule, would like to know everything in detail. We'll talk about the details, but to summarize that background, it turns out that Dr. Dushek and his wife spent a long time studying essays, including 18th century ones, where the effects of certain medicinal herbs was mentioned or indicated. So, they created their own database, which they resort to when creating formulas. However, there was a very successful experience. We are not talking about Biluron. We know what it is about. There was a successful experience, in particular in Vietnam, related to creating a product for the immune system, an immunomodulator based on herbal extracts. The information is important because it was that particular activity that served as the basis for the product we are going to talk about. The foundation for Fetoviron was laid back then. And the greatest advantage is that there is a base. That is, a large number of studies have been carried out. And the positive result, and the diagram that you can see, is nothing more than the result of studies that were conducted, in this case, in Vietnam. Accordingly, there are several more diagrams related to this era that you can probably also comment on. I have opened the next diagram. Yes, we need this diagram, but there is still another one that we need. Is there one more diagram? You're welcome. It's about the population of lymphocytes. Just a second. Yes, here you can see the change in the lymphocyte population. On the left, you can see the data of the group that received antibiotics and of the group that received our extracts in addition to antibiotics. One can clearly see an increase in the population of lymphocytes that play one of the main roles in the immune system. In the immune system, there is cell immunity, where lymphocytes play an important role, and there is humoral immunity, when regulation is carried out through substances that the immune system produces itself. They are called differently cytokines and others. This can be seen in slide 7. Just a second. Here it is, the 7th. We see the level of cytokine, which plays an important role in the immune system, because it regulates the action of T and B lymphocytes. The diagram shows that the level of this cytokine, called interleukin-2, falls in the group of patients who received only antibiotics. That is, under the influence of antibiotics, immune defense deteriorates. On the right, you can see that in those patients who took our extract in addition to antibiotics, on the contrary, the level of interleukin-2 does not decrease, but increases. The level of interleukins shows how strong the immune system of the person is. I would like to show you these results as evidence of the effectiveness of those herbs that were ingredients of the previous and current product. although the new composition is slightly modified. So we move on to technology. In this case, technology plays, perhaps, a key role and is quite interesting. There are a few steps. Dr. Dushek has already talked a little about this. The search for the perfect formula, let's call it so. The first step is the selection of ideal components. We heard that essays and various annals had been used, the perfect sources of knowledge on how this or that medicinal herbs work. I was at the production site, and you saw shots from there at the beginning. So let's start with the first step, the selection. Please tell us where the herbs came from. I will turn on this slide. No matter what number it is, just look at how many herbal extracts there are in the product and where you bring all these herbs from, Dr. Dushek. In this slide, it is clear that 21 herbal extracts were included in the final composition. However, when we started, we considered 57 herbs. Although each of them had a positive effect on immunity, we had to exclude antagonist herbs. That is, those whose presence worsened the properties of the whole composition. That's why my wife and I had to develop a system for determining antagonists and synergists. But to start working with synergy, you must extract it all, and you chose the water alcohol extracts. Can you say why you used them in your phyto formulas? They were used 300 years ago, so this is nothing new. These extracts are alcohol because the active substances we need in herbs are not water-soluble, but alcohol-soluble. That is, they can be extracted from the herb only with alcohol. They are not only extracted with alcohol, but they should also enter the body in an alcohol solution. When dry, they will not be so effective. That's why Fetoviron is an alcohol-containing liquid. Yes, and you still have some kind of differentiated extraction technology of your own. Please tell us a little about this. Well, this is not the technology of our own. We just use the ancient experience, but take a new look at it. Why new? Because as far as the European pharmacopoeia today is concerned, everyone is trying to get phyto extracts using solutions with high alcohol content of around 70%. Yes, a 70% alcohol solution always makes it possible to extract some kind of active substance. However, we know from the literature that depending on the concentration of the alcohol solution, completely different active substances can be extracted from the same herb. Hence, we looked at what would happen at different concentrations of alcohol, 20, 30, 40%. Let's take the example of active substances from birch leaves. Here is a diagram. If you look from left to right, there is 0% of alcohol at the beginning. Then we observe the first peak of extraction, 30% of alcohol, the second peak 70, and 98 or 100% at the end. You see the numbers. There are various active substances which are many in the birch leaves. So, If we want to extract the active substance that we need, we should use a certain concentration of alcohol. According to the scientific literature, birch leaves have a diuretic effect. This is due to the content of active substances 12, 13, 14, which are extracted at an alcohol concentration of 70 to 75%. However, few people know that birch leaves contain substances with an anti-inflammatory effect, but they are extracted by only 35% of alcohol. As an example, these are the substances numbers 4, 5, and 6. With an increase in alcohol concentration, they cannot be extracted. That's why we use an individual approach to the extraction process, and we select a solution with the desired alcohol content for every single herb. So, Dr. Dušek, if you don't mind, let me summarize this important information. Firstly, the extraction of each herb takes place at Dr. Dušek's production site. That is, ready-made extracts are not purchased, but the herbs are brought like raw materials, out of which Dr. Dušek produces every single extract at his plant according to his own technology. They are 21. The concentration of alcohol is important too. Depending on the concentration of alcohol used, we experience the activation of certain effects of the herbs. We had an example with birch leaves. At the extraction with 70% of alcohol, as prescribed by the European Pharmacopoeia, the diuretic effect of birch leaves is achieved. We do not need this, however. We need an anti-inflammatory effect that is best activated with 30% of alcohol. This effect is not observed when extraction is performed with 70% alcohol. Such a differentiated approach takes place with each extract. That is, we work on each extract in order to achieve maximal effect that is required in every single case. Dr. Dušek, we've been talking about extraction. Now it's time to talk about the synergy of the components. So, you have started telling us about what method you use to understand which herbs exhibit a synergistic effect and which are antagonistic. I think it's quite interesting. The bottom line is that we were looking for a solution to see how herbal extracts interact with one another. It is known that upon evaporation, the solids of the solution crystallize. When water evaporates from a water alcohol solution, crystals remain. We make the number 1 extract and evaporate it, and crystals are formed. If we mix 2 herbs in a solution and evaporate them, crystals are also formed. We searched for the opportunity to systematize it and started working with crystals. What do crystals show us? We take extracts of 2 plants, for example, plant number 1 and plant number 2. We mix these extracts and make crystallization. From the resulting pattern, we can determine if the interaction between these extracts is positive or not. So, we've sorted out the first 2 components. Then we look for the next, 3rd extract. We add it to the first 2 extracts and crystallize. If we get the same picture as above, this means a good crystallization effect. That is, the extracts are synergistic. If there is a partial collapse of the crystals, as below, we can conclude that the 3rd extract is not synergistic with extract number 1, and number 2. Using this painstaking method of selection, we had to check all 57 extracts. Well, when we reached the final formula, extracts of 21 herbs remained in it, which interacted without violating the crystallization effect. In fact, it seems to me that it is worth repeating once again, summarizing this information, because this is a quite exciting action. We talk a lot about synergy, and in my activity, I encounter it every day. It is crucial for us. I have always said that a big number of components are not very good, because there is an anti-synergistic effect, and in general, it's better to strive for monoformulas and achieve maximum bioavailability. However, in this case, when the selection is done this way, manually, I can only imagine how many combinations you could have. That is, once again, one extract is mixed with another, and crystals from the evaporated residues are studied. Accordingly, their structure is being studied. If it's holistic, according to Dr. Dushek's methods and methodology, the addition of other extracts continues. And as soon as this structure falls apart, it becomes clear that the last of the added extracts have some bad effect on it. So this extract is changed to another. Such work is carried out until we have a ready-made formula with the correct structure where all the assets used will be synergistic. Well, this is just incredibly difficult, painstaking, and quite long labor. Not only does this extract require an individual approach, that is, each extract is made according to its own technology, through trial and error, which is also the subject of research, but you also understand what this 30 years' work, which Dr. Dushek outlined at the very beginning, means. This is hard work that he did with his wife, who is also a doctor. It's always very nice to come and communicate with them. Accordingly, many years of collaborative effort was the result of what we have today. 21 extracts prepared at the production, taking into account synergy. This is the third key step of this product's manufacturing technology. The next point is the proportions of the ingredients that make up the medication. That is, there may be more of this, less of that. Dr. Dushek, tell us a little about that, if it's not a secret, of course. Well, that is exactly the secret that I will reveal to you quite a bit. Every herb contains its own active substances, which influence the final effect of the medication. So, we had to become artists who selected the colors of the right shades. We look at the effect of an extract and decide whether to enhance its effect or leave it as it is. If we leave it as it is, we take one dose, but if we decide to strengthen it, we add 1 or 2 doses more. Thus, the proportions of the extracts are selected for the final composition of the product. In those large glass containers, which you see on your screens, the extracts are stored. If you like, I can tell you about this process of production. I think we are ready to listen to you for years on end, Dr. Dushek. I've just deliberately turned on the slide to show you in the laboratory with these large flasks where the herbal extracts are stored. Well, Now I'm going to tell you how the finished product is made. So, we already know what herbs we take. We know the concentration of alcohol we use to obtain each extract. We know how many doses of each extract we need for the final composition. We have already learned about all of this to produce Fetoviron medication. At the very beginning, we used 3-liter containers, but such small volumes stopped meeting the needs of our production quite quickly, and we switched to extraction in 30-liter containers. In the near future, we plan to switch to 300-liter containers for extracts. What does it mean to get an extract? We fill the container with a water alcohol solution and add a certain amount of a dry plant. It can be roots or leaves, or the whole herb, depending on what kind of active substance we'd like to get. Now, all the extracts are prepared automatically, and in ancient times, these mixtures were prepared manually, being mixed once or twice a day, and this process lasted 2 to 3 months until the extract was ready. At the very beginning, we did it in the same manner, but such process time did not suit us. So we decided to try out the technology that is used in the automotive industry for mixing paints. We began to use a fully automated production line. By comparing the chromatographic analysis of the solution, which was obtained in the traditional way, with our solution from time to time, we determined how long we had to mix our solutions automatically to get the same results as in the traditional method. When preparing the solution took 2 to 3 months. It turned out that after 7 days of automated production, proper extracts were ready. This helped us a lot in increasing the output of our medications. Now that we have 21 ready-made extracts, we can proceed to the next step and mix them. Now it makes sense to tell you exactly which plants should be taken. Probably we will not talk about every one of them now. We will definitely talk about it some other time. In the meantime, let's talk about what herbs exactly make for the composition. Which herbs are your favorite and often used, and whose active action you like? We have herbs that were there from the very beginning. I can say that I like those plants that we do not have in Germany, and which it is sometimes very difficult for me to get. For example, this is the chaga mushroom. Chaga mushroom, which is supplied from Russia. Yes, it is delivered from Russia, although it's sometimes delivered, sometimes it's not. Sometimes I have to come to Russia with a suitcase to buy it, because we don't have it here in Germany. That's why we always keep a stock of chaga. This is a wonderful thing. We know for sure that the results of the TBC patient study perfectly activates lymphocytes and even regulates the lymphocytic effect. Well, the second plant is Eleutherococcus. It is also called Siberian Ginseng. Yes, Siberian Ginseng is also from Russia. However, Eleutherococcus is already grown in other countries. It has the same properties as chaga, but except for activating lymphocytes, it also supports phagocytosis and stimulates it quite well. Phagocytosis is a very important process from the immunological point of view because it destroys dead or infected cells, tissues, and bacteria. This is what phagocystic systems do. In the same way, I could talk about each of the 21 herbs. Now let's talk about the creation of Fetoviron. When bird flu appeared several years ago, we were again asked to do something similar to a medication for TBC, but so that it could fight viruses. I then replied that our medication would only act to support the immune system. And if we want to get antiviral effects, we need to add some more herbs. So, the composition of Fetoviron is by 70% what there already was present in the composition of medication, which had proven itself in fighting tuberculosis, and by 30% consisting of herbs that we had additionally included in the composition and which had an antivirus effect and were successfully used in viral diseases. Yes, thanks a lot. We will talk about each single component separately. We will have a separate broadcast for this. The product in this case is so rich in texture that it is very difficult to cover it all in some more or less acceptable terms. So today we create a picture of the product with general strokes. I can say that as far as Fetoviron is concerned, the analogy with our packs is very close. In our packs, each particular product carries a certain function. As far as Fetoviron is concerned, it is due to absolutely fantastic technology and the approach that is used to create a product, a group of components. Every group has its own meaning. Some components prevent the virus from entering the cell. Some components stimulate the production of certain immune cells. Some regulate the excessive immune response that is characteristic for a viral infection. Let me make sure that I've got this right, Dr. Duszek. Some of the presented extracts work specifically to regulate the production of the certain immune cells, don't they? Yes, but we will touch upon this matter when we start talking about how Fetoviron works. I have opened the general slide, and now you can say what you wanted. The question arises, what is the mechanism of the Fetoviron action? Well, we know that 70% of its composition was transferred from the previous medication, which proved itself to be good, and by 30% Fetoviron was improved with new herbs. Today it has 21 herbs in its composition. What is Fetoviron? This is a complex preparation, specially developed based on extracts of 21 medicinal plants, which were collected from around the world. As you have already seen, we buy herbs in Morocco, the USA, Argentina, Macedonia, Poland, Romania, Russia, China, wherever these herbs grow. Each of them contains active substances, the action of which is proved by the practice of use or scientifically confirmed, and which become active at different stages of the fight against the virus, as well as the consequences of viral infections. I tried to divide the groups of plants in these stages, so the actions that Fetoviron possesses turned out to be the following. Its first action is immunomodulation. Immunomodulation is determined by the action of those herbs that were part of the previous medication. These are chaga mushroom, birch leaves, Eleutherococcus. They have highly powerful immunomodulatory properties, which makes it possible to normalize the number of lymphocytes, their groups, and subgroups. These are T helpers, T suppressors, all the immune system cells that should yield to some kind of the general immune regulation to make the whole system work. What if a system member goes beyond the possible? After all, that is exactly why they are called immunomodulators. They modulate or regulate, i.e., they lower this level. Or, if the concentration of some immune cells is low, immunomodulators, on the contrary, try to raise it. This is why we can talk about immunomodulation. A very important immunomodulatory effect is exerted by cytokines. These are the substances that the body regulates itself, and the cells of the immune system and the relationship between the immune system and other cells. So the first action of Fetoviron is immunomodulation. The product contains many herbs that have adaptogenic properties. These are the plants whose active substances significantly reduce the impact of unsettling situations on the body. A contagious disease is also an unsettling situation. Thus, they accelerate the recovery of a person. Another important point is those plants that we added to the composition later. Their active substances can block the virus attachment with a cell. If we block the virus attachment with a cell, this is a very good preventative effect in itself. The virus must first attach. For this, it uses a special hemagglutinin protein. Figuratively speaking, gets stuck. When the virus has stuck to the cell, it looks for a place where it can enter through the cell membrane. There are herbs in the Fetoviron composition whose active components block both the virus attachment to the cell and penetration into it. Accordingly, the more viruses cannot attach and cannot enter the cell, the fewer virus-infected cells there are in the body. Here we see direct preventative action. Thus, we reduce the possible viral load. Let's keep on watching the situation developing in the body. Of course, we cannot completely prevent penetration of all viruses. Some of them will enter the cells and begin to replicate inside the cell. That is, multiply. For the virus to multiply, it needs a healthy living cell. Fetoviron contains extracts whose active substances slow down the process of virus replication. So, we try to slow down the virus attachment, its penetration into the cell, and if the virus still enters the cell, we try to prevent it from multiplying too quickly. Regarding the sequence of processes that occur after the virus enters the cell, if the virus has already entered, the cell responds with the release of a huge number of cytokines. Cytokines are distributed throughout the body and attract many other immune cells from many other parts of the body. Immune cells are concentrated where there is a pathological process. It doesn't matter where it is located, whether it is in the lungs, heart, or liver. There are always cytokine responses. The accumulation of immune cells in a certain place indicates that there an infection process has begun, and it must be regulated. Many of our herbs regulate the release of cytokines, increasing the number of those that are few and reducing the number of those that are many. Well, the last point to which I wish to refer: when the fight against the virus ends, the cytokines return to their initial level. However, if the body does not have time to adjust to the right level of cytokines in time, at some point, a cytokine with the complicated name HMGB1 appears. When cytokine is in tissues, it increases their permeability to liquids and provokes edema. Sometimes the consequence is organ failure. That is, in the organs where the swelling appeared, there is a metabolic disorder, and the organ can no longer work as it should. If the body does not cope with this situation, the disease may result in death. I am glad that I have added 2 herbs in Fetoviron, licorice root and angelica root, because there are the results of 2 or 3 last year's research which studied the ability of plants to inhibit the cytokine HMGB1, demonstrating that just these 2 herbs have this property. They bind this cytokine so it cannot act, and then edema does not occur, and the patient's condition improves.